Okay, I'm going to suggest we go ahead and get started. It's 6:03 and people can continue to join the call. Welcome everyone to the Fire Recovery Town Hall with 5th District Supervisor Bruce McPherson and the Valley Women's Club of the San Lorenzo Valley. I'm J.M. Brown, staff to Supervisor McPherson. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started tonight. Upon joining the call, you will have noticed that all participants are muted and their cameras are deactivated. We will only see and hear the speakers throughout the webinar this evening. There are two reasons for this. One, we want to minimize any disruptions in the background to ensure everyone can hear clearly. And two, we want to make sure we conduct the Q&A portion in a way that gives the maximum number of people the opportunity to ask questions. So after our speakers have made their presentations, those of you who are joining us on the Zoom application on your computers should type your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your toolbar rather than the chat function or virtually raising your hand as you may have done in other Zoom meetings. Those functions are too difficult to manage on a call with hundreds of participants, and we don't want to miss any of your good questions. So again, please use the Q&A feature to ask a question this evening. And when we see your questions pop up in the Q&A function, we will read them aloud and ensure that they get answered by the right person on the webinar. And tonight we'll take as many questions as our time allows. If you are joining us by phone, you are asked to submit questions ahead of time, which we will read on your behalf. But if during the course of this webinar, those of us who are on the phone would like to submit a question in real time, please send an email to me at jm, that's the initials jm.brown@santacruzcounty.us, and I will try to get your questions into the mix. Lastly, we are recording the webinar tonight and hope to share it on social media and on other platforms for those who are not able to join us or for those who want to refer back to information we learned this evening. So without further ado, I would like to turn the meeting over to Supervisor Bruce McPherson.
Thanks, Jim, and good evening and welcome to everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and thanks to the Valley Women's Club for co-hosting this webinar. Let me begin by saying to all of our community members who lost their homes in this devastating fire, you are all in our thoughts and prayers every day, and we are very sorry that not only did you lose your homes, but many of your lost valuable possessions that carry some profound significance to you and your family. Our sympathies are not alone. They alone won't help you rebuild. Our actions really are what will help you rebuild, and that is why we're here tonight to hear about the county's recovery plans, both near-term and long-term, and answer your questions as best we can. This will be the first of many town halls as we offer to keep you informed and hear from you directly of what you need. Tonight we're going to hear primarily from our Public Works Director and Deputy County Administrative Officer Matt Machado, who will provide highlights of our plans and actions to date. And then you will hear from our Environmental Health Director, Marilyn Underwood, about the very urgent issues surrounding debris removal and property cleanup and septic tank replacements and repair. Also here tonight, we have our Acting County Administrative Officer, Nicole Colburn, Elisa Benson, our Assistant CAO, Janet Mio, the President of Valley Women's Club, and Nancy Macy, President of the Environmental Committee of the Women's Club. Also, Julie Wiest, a Valley Women's Club board member who lost her home in Boulder Creek and is providing some helpful real-time advice of the actions that we should take. We're also going to be hearing from Scott Chamberlain and Tom Hardy from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. You'll probably hear it referred to as FEMA, and Kevin Wynn from the Small Business Administration, or SBA. These agencies, along with the California Office of Emergency Services, are critical in helping us and our residents recover. And lastly, to help sort out questions will be two of my analysts, J.M. Brown, who you just heard from, and Jenny Johnson, who many of you have heard from to date as well. But before I turn it over to Matt and Marilyn, I'd like to share a few other things. The Lighting Complex, the CZU Lighting Fire Complex, is unprecedented in our county, and it comes at a time when our resources and frankly our community resilience is stretched thin by the COVID-19 pandemic and related economic and social impacts. So far, estimates of the private and public property damage is $340 million. And we know that number is going to go up. We also know that residents, businesses, families are already under a lot of stress adjusting to the loss of work. There are changes in social habits, schools are being physically closed, and businesses losing revenue as a result of COVID-19. And now that we have more than 400 homes in the San Lorenzo Valley alone, and a like amount, just a few more, in the 3rd district of my colleague Ryan Coonerty, Supervisor Ryan Coonerty, that have been destroyed and others have been badly damaged. But I'm also grateful that we have not had a single loss of light in our district as a result of fires, and that there was not even a fender bender when more than 60,000 people were calmly and respectfully evacuated. We stood up a dozen shelters that at their business time had about, I guess about 2,500 evacuees and hundreds of animals to go with it. We've also demonstrated once again that we care about our neighbors with respect to our first responders, and we're going to be there for each other as we rebuild. And I will say that some of these first responders and others who helped, they had their houses destroyed as well. It's just unbelievable, not surprising about their commitment to helping others. Tonight, I know that many of you are going to have questions and concerns about how the fire was fought and how repopulations occurred. Let me assure you that there will be a time and a place for that conversation with the community. CAL FIRE and the county will conduct reviews of the response to this fire, as is done in every fire, and we will benefit from lessons learned and share those with the community. But I want to say thank you to our firefighters, law enforcement, public health staff, hundreds of our own county staff, employees, nonprofits, businesses, faith communities, and neighbors who played a role in minimizing the harm to our community. You are all heroes, and a special thank you to our Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, who helped us speed up some of the federal processes when we really needed them. Tonight, I really want to focus on recovery and making sure we inform you well about the next steps. And we also want to set accurate expectations about the difficulties and challenges that are going to lie ahead, including cleanup, permitting, what help is available financially for those with limited resources to rebuild. On that note, I want to let you know that the Board of Supervisors heard from our staff on Tuesday on a very extensive report on the initial recovery and rebuilding approach, which the board passed unanimously and without question. I wish we could do more. But Matt and Marilyn soon will cover that in more detail, but I want to let you know that I am looking at everything related to this process through 3 main lenses: affordability, feasibility, and predictability. As I know, my partner in this work, Supervisor Ryan Coonerty of the 3rd District, he supports those same principles, and you will see us working hand in hand, as well as with our other 3 colleagues on the board, from a policy-making perspective. Together, we provided additional direction Tuesday for our staff to explore ways to address some very real practical concerns related to septic tanks, temporary housing, energy and water systems, and adding outside resources to the county to ensure we do this work efficiently and effectively on behalf of our residents. With that, I'm going to be turning this over to Matt Machado, our Public Works Director, and after Matt, to Marilyn Underwood, our Environmental Health Director. I appreciate each and every one of you and your interests. We will answer every question that we can, and we know that there's going to be some lingering, but just be patient, and we're going to be working as hard as we can. Matt Machado, of our Public Works Director and Deputy CAO, would you please tell us where we are in that regard of what you're overseeing?
Absolutely. Thank you, Bruce, and good evening, everybody. And so I'm going to start with just a quick status on where we are. So the firefight is over. They're actually going to declare the fire over this Sunday night. And but most of you know that already. You've been up there, you live up there, you see that the firefight is over. And And clearly the recovery has been moving forward for the past time, and it's going to continue to ramp up. Let me give you a little status on where we are in terms of infrastructure. That's important. A lot of our systems were disrupted. They're in a fragile state, and so we need to be extra safe. We have to be conserving water. And so let me start with PG&E. We were informed this morning that as of September 19th, just in a couple of days, they will be 100% energized. They've been rebuilding systems rapidly, and so that's good news. Water systems, we've got a couple of water systems up in the valley. The Big Basin system is pressurized, but only at 50% capacity, and they're awaiting some test results to ensure water quality is drinkable. So please be patient if you're in that area, and please conserve water. Their capacity is down. San Lorenzo Valley Water District, they've been working very, very hard to get all their connections pressurized. They have only 4 left that are not pressurized, and those they're working hard on. And they have just 450 that are still do not drink or do not boil. And so they're working hard to get that water quality back up to par so that people can use their water as they wish. Bottled water is available. And again, their storage is down, and so please conserve water. On the front of public works in our road system, we did sustain a lot of damage. We've been rebuilding it as quickly as we can. We have replaced about 420 signs that were burned, and those are back new now. Roadway safety is of the utmost importance, and it's our lifeline to you and you to us. And so please be safe as you travel. Some of the other efforts, they continue to remove debris, such as trees that are falling. We did have a bridge we had to replace on Swan Road, which I know is outside this area, but it shows the magnitude of the destruction that we're rebuilding. Culverts are being replaced and repaired, and guardrail is being contracted to be replaced now. We lost a lot of guardrail, and so back to the safety. Please be careful out there. We are beginning to winterize right now for roads. That means we're clearing the ditches. We're clearing as much debris as we possibly can. We want to get debris out of the mountains before the winters hit, which leads me to another big effort. It's debris flows, and I'm gonna leave Marilyn to talk about debris cleanup, but another big concern that we're working on is debris flows, and that is debris coming out of the mountains left behind from the fire. It's gonna be flowing downhill with just a little bit of rain, and so we're gonna watch it very, very closely. We are currently in a mode of assessing the hazards. We're gonna be mapping those. We think within a couple of weeks, we'll have some good maps of the highest risk areas so that we can start to message and educate people who live in these areas. And then, of course, we're going to prepare evacuation plans for the winter months when we do see rains coming. And we did hear from National Weather Service that they are anticipating a rather wet winter. We won't know that till we get there, but we need to anticipate the worst and hope for the best. And so bear with us on that. With regard to the other parts of recovery, Bruce mentioned the board item that went to the board this week. It was very, very detailed. And there's a lot of great goals in there. We're really pushing hard to work with homeowners to get their temporary shelters and their permanent shelters. And I'm just gonna leave you with one note on that. It is that we are trying to get to yes, but there are a lot of challenges. And those challenges include reliable water, a way to dispose of your wastewater, and access. Access is going to be extra complicated, and we know that because our EPA partners are up there starting to remove household hazardous waste, and they're telling us that some of these areas are very, very tight, and we know that. And we all have to keep in mind that as we rebuild, we still need to know the long-term needs are going to be getting vehicles in there like ambulances and fire trucks. So we've got to be complete in our analysis, and so please bear with us. I'm going to stop there because I know there's going to be a lot of questions this evening, and so I'll turn the microphone over to Marilyn.
Good evening. I also want to share my sorrow about the losses for those of you. I know a good friend of mine and her husband lost their home up off in Bonnie Doon area, so I do understand what that means. And I went with them when they went back up there the first time, and it was very impactful. So with that in mind, I wanted to share with you what I know they were concerned about, which is the toxicity of the ash. And this, again, we're talking about within the structure of the house. And so I'm going to share a little bit about what we're doing about debris removal. And this, again, is within the structure of the house. We know that over 86,000 acres of mostly trees and vegetation burned. And so that does not have some of the toxic concerns that we have within the structure of the home. Again, from mercury, lead, antimony, a number of other heavy metals that are left behind in the ash and have to be disposed of in a different way. So it's not just that it's toxic for re-entrainment, toxic to if it goes down in the watershed and to our water, affects our critters, affects our drinking water, but it actually also impacts where you're allowed to take it, this debris, because of its toxicity. That landfills have to get waivers to accept it, and they can get waivers to accept it after the household hazardous waste and some of this other waste is removed from it. So this is some information I've learned over the years from hearing from my colleagues, been environmental health directors in Sonoma County and Butte County and Napa County. And what it is has been established now sort of as a two-phase effort. The first phase is this no-cost part of it that's, in our case, going to be done by US EPA. And they're going in there because kind of a stopgap to fill a hole, which is to get the hazardous waste out so that the next step of the debris removal can happen and can be taken to a landfill. With some, and I'll speak about it briefly about some of the other aspects of phase two, I'll call it. So phase one is this no cost. US EPA will have their boots on the ground here next week. They've already got a place to set up in Felton. And they'll be bringing approximately 100 folks in to help this community. And they will be deploying out starting at least September 28th, we think. I will say that they too have some, they're a little bit slower getting here than I think we would like. And they have expressed to us, this is because they have these COVID concerns that they have to operate within. In fact, they are requiring that all of these 100 people all be tested for COVID before they arrive. So that adds to another layer for them. And then obviously in social distancing while they're doing their work here, they haven't had to do that before in other fires. So this is adding some complexity to it. In that phase one, again, they will be removing those things that are obviously household hazardous waste, in some cases marking propane tanks that need to be, that are empty but can be taken care of in phase two. They will be removing they will have an asbestos expert in each team, and they will be removing obvious asbestos stuff, but in other cases the phase two will involve also an asbestos removal aspect as well. Once that is completed on a parcel, they will be leaving a sign that indicates that they took care of the household hazardous waste there. And they also showed us a mapping technology using GIS that you can look at on your internet, and you can see the progress that they have made, and in fact can look to see if your parcel had gotten through the household hazardous waste step. So they'll be progressing through that. They anticipate that it would take them 6 to 8 weeks. At the same time, we have asked for second phase of phase two, so that we would have a public option. And this would mean that it would be no cost to the homeowner. If you have homeowner's insurance that includes a debris removal clause to it, you're asked to disclose that as part of the right of entry form that you will be asked to sign. Again, you can still use, I know the question has come up before, like you might want to use some of the debris removal for, say, tree hazards removal. That will not then, you can use that. It's not going to be some of the funds that they would then ask for you to provide back to them for the debris removal. And if it costs more than your debris removal and your insurance, that cost there'll be no cost to you. So that's a public option. They would go in, and again, they actually will remove some of the trees that are dangerous to them doing their work. They will be removing the ash debris from the inside. They will remove metal and wash it and do metal recycling, including refrigerators and the metal from different appliances. They will remove the foundation And I know there's been lots of questions about foundations. It turns out foundations do not survive heat very well. And if there is an option, certainly if you want to consider it, to retain your foundation, but you will need a structural engineer to indicate that it's safe for you to reuse, because they just do not fare well. And then they'll be taking out some soil below the foundation. And the reason why that is because, again, the contaminants get into the top surface soil. In order to show that they've removed those contaminants, they take soil samples from within the footprint of the house, and they compare them to both health screening values and also background values that will be established for the community. During all of this, they will be wetting the ash enough to make sure it doesn't re-entrain and create a problem, so that your neighbors some neighbors, there's sometimes houses that nearby that were still standing, that again have concerns about the ash being re-entrained for them. I'm trying to remember some of the other aspects. Oh, and again, they will, if there is asbestos, they will be looking for asbestos and testing for asbestos with an asbestos expert and removing it properly, because again, that needs special care. If you would like not to do the public option, there will be a private option. And that, again, obviously with the cost would be that something that you would cover, and you could use some of your insurance coverage, whatever. We will be providing a work plan. This is something similar that they have done in other counties, so that your contractor, or you, if you choose to do it as a homeowner, can look at this work plan and review it and say, okay, I can do everything in there. Here's my application. And again, you'll have to do the same things. You'll have to make sure you wet your ash. You have to make sure you have you will require an asbestos. Even if you want to do it privately, you'll need to have an asbestos expert. If you want to retain the foundation, you'll need a structural engineer to verify for that. You need to make sure that you remove the product and the debris in the correct fashion. And then you'll need to check in with the landfills that you want to take that material to. We will be having some information about that. We're trying to provide a list of where you could take your the recycled metal, where you could take your asbestos, where you could take the ash debris. And the foundation, we actually hope that we have some fake people that can recycle the foundation once it's washed. So all of that will be part of that work plan that you could, as a property owner, choose to do. You would submit it to us, we would review it, and then approve it and allow you to move forward with that. So that's kind of the phase two. We hope a public option, and I will say to you, we have not gotten the official word from, it turns out, the FEMA people, Federal Emergency Management Association, agency, sorry, not association. They are in conversation with the Office of Emergency Services, which is a state agency, about this. And it's not that they don't want to assist us, they do, but it is a lot about the numbers, making sure that they can cover the costs of this that will occur. And they haven't worked those numbers out, having just had a conversation with OES not too long ago. So as soon as we hear that they've worked the numbers out on that public option for phase two, we will be putting on our website, making available at the Resource Recovery Center, various options. We will be making documents available for you to choose that public option or to choose your private contractor, your own option. So we are waiting, and I know it's terrible. It's hard for me because I know I get a lot of inquiries from a lot of people, from email, from phone calls and such, that really want to be able to move forward. And I know it's very frustrating to wait for this process to unfold. So I thought maybe I'd stop there. I know there's some issues down the road about septic and temporary housing, but I thought maybe I'd just right now focus on the debris removal stage.
Perfect. Thank you, Marilyn. Before I ask a question or want to get some opening remarks from Scott Chamberlain of FEMA, Matt, did you have a couple more details that you wanted to just point out as well? Sure.
Thank you, Bruce. And so, so you just heard Marilyn describe the debris removal process, which is really critical to the recovery. It's what opens the doors so that we could start rebuilding structures. Now, part of that structure placement, and I know there's a lot of interest of getting temporary structures, but one of the critical factors that is that's a part of that right now is our debris flow hazard assessment. We really need to understand that we don't want people to set up temporary housing or even start their permanent housing until we know where those hazards are, because debris flows are very, very dangerous. And so please be patient with us. We're working very hard on that. We will be messaging out where we think those hazards are the greatest, and we'll have to put together a plan for that. The other thing I wanted to share is, as this debris removal, the one that Marilyn was speaking to, as that gets cleaned up, we're also looking very closely at our building permit process and streamlining. Streamlining is absolutely critical. The county is already in negotiations with a consultant team that will streamline the process for us. When we think about the 1,000 homes that need to be rebuilt, that's a tall order. So we're bringing in the help we need to be successful with that process. The team that we're in discussions with right now, they believe we can put together a program where we can turn around a lot of these permits in like 5 to 7 days. Now, these are for just replacement structures, the straightforward ones. I know there's going to be a lot of complicated ones, and that's why I mentioned the idea that we really need to be thoughtful about what we permit back into the area, with ensuring that they have water and wastewater disposal system and access. Access is going to be important, and we're going to coordinate with our fire district and fire agencies to ensure that what is built out there can be serviced for the good of the people. And so I did want to mention that it is a process, and even the future steps are being worked on today. The streamlining of the building permit process is being worked on today, so that as the debris gets cleaned up and you're in our offices trying to get permits, we'll be there ready, waiting, and be able to service you quickly and efficiently. So I wanted to add that in there. The last note I'm going to add is that data is really important. And I've heard a lot from different people about they don't think their data is in our hands. Well, I can assure you it is. It's just that we haven't been able to display it correctly yet. We did get the CAL FIRE database, and it had a few gaps because they were moving quickly and they were fighting a fire. We've did some QA/QC on that. CAL FIRE did submit their final report just a day or so ago. But that's not the final report either in terms of what's really out on the ground. Our building inspectors and environmental health inspectors have spent quite a bit of time out there trying to assess all of your structures and homes. And that database is being cleaned up now, and we plan to present that onto our website in a GIS function layer so that you could see and know that we've got you covered in terms of the data. Data is important, but give us some time to get that up and running. I know it's been mentioned already, but the county's website is really a center point of communication for all of us. So watch it closely. It's pretty intuitive, and there's a lot of great information, and it's going to be updated regularly. So watch for that. I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Bruce. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Scott Chamberlain from FEMA, could you please give us a brief summary of some of the individual assistance programs? Because I know that there are options available, and we'd appreciate if you could give us a summary of some of those that are available immediately and at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So for FEMA, we want to encourage everyone. We know it's a very hard time right now, and our hearts go out with you, but please register so that you can be eligible for some of these programs. Some of the programs after you've registered with FEMA that you might be eligible for, we have rental assistance where we can give you a grant to find a place to stay if your home is not livable after the disaster. We have repair money. We have replacement dollars for a home that's been completely destroyed. And we have reimbursement for hotel stays. The one thing that I want to say about the programs is that we cannot duplicate any benefit that you already received. So if you're receiving insurance for any of those programs, FEMA would not be able to assist you after those, but those are just part of the programs at the very beginning that are available. They're not in total all the programs that'll be available that FEMA will be offering.
And Mr. Chamberlain, I know that some people are anxious to get going, but if they do it themselves, they're not eligible for reimbursement. Is that correct? You have to have a plan of attack sort of out there before they get going, if they're going to get reimbursed?
So as long as people keep their receipts, there's a chance that they could be reimbursed if they worked on the property before FEMA got involved. But that's why we absolutely encourage everyone to register with FEMA first so that we can get you in the system and then help you try to determine what you're going to be eligible for after the disaster.
And they register, is it FEMAassistant.com or what is what's the best way, the most immediate way to go down at the,
So
well, go ahead.
mobile is 1-800-621-FEMA, which is 3362. And they can also register on their phone at FEMA.gov, or I guess on their computer. And then we're also working in local area centers. And if they go in person to a local area center, they can be registered there as well.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'll move on to begin the questions. I know that the Valor Women's Club had a set of questions that they would like to ask. If you go ahead and ask those, and I think we have the appropriate people here that could answer them. You're on mute. Jane, you're on mute.
Thank you. I have a question that came up several times. There are quite a few people who do not want to rebuild. And what is the fastest and easiest way to get out of the property responsibility?
Is there anyone on the call who feels most adequate to respond to that question?
Well, I think she's probably talking about the debris removal, and I do believe that there is going to be a oh, she's shaking her head no. Jane, clarify.
No, somebody who wants to find out what what these people will have to do in order to abandon, so to speak, their property. Do they have to go to the tax office? Do they have to, how, so to speak, how to be rid of the responsibility of the property?
They're not going to rebuild.
They don't want to rebuild.
So I'll speak to the assessor side of it. There is a calamity adjustment, so they can adjust the tax roll. And so that'll be clear. In terms of ownership, they would, most likely they'd want to sell it, put it up for sale, because there still would be some value to that land, even without a structure. So the assessment will get corrected, adjusted to reflect the true cost of the land. And then the landowner could choose to sell at that point.
Okay, so they would have to have a calamity adjustment, correct? And yeah,
they're working on it. That's right.
Go.
So I'll just share that when I was talking about the data, a lot of the data is being cleaned up and reviewed, and it's being reviewed parcel by the assessor's office. And they're doing that so they know what the value has become, because it's changing right now. And so that's part of that data collection. And so we can display that data in the coming weeks, and people can ensure that we've got it correctly, and we'll continue to correct it. And then once it's correct, then it'll be reflected in the tax roll, and then the landowner can take those next steps as they choose.
Okay, so it's 2 steps. So, okay. Then my other question is, what's the best contact number for reporting smoldering spots? Because quite a few residents have found smoldering spots, and weren't sure what the most effective way was to report those.
Call 911 because that happened up at the top of a neighbor from when I was up at my property, and it could be dust from it could be dust, it could be ash, it could be a hot spot. So if you see a hot spot, you need to dial 911 and they will patch you into the local fire department who may patch them into CAL FIRE. So if
So don't call direct the direct
no,
number?
I would just call 911 because then it's properly tracked and traced and dispersed the way it should be, and it just notifies them that there's an emergency, and they track all that information. They've put a few fires out with helicopters yesterday and today in Boulder Creek, I know.
Okay, thank you. And then is the county requiring that PG&E is replacing the damaged equipment with updated equipment materials?
I'll respond to that, or I'll try. And so the county is not requiring it, but PG&E is doing that. And so the structure they lost, they are replacing it with a more resilient structure, heavier poles, protected wire. They've rebuilt. Yes, I know. We all celebrated that one too. I don't know if it's every square inch of it, but they tell us that the main lines are being replaced at a much higher level of resiliency. And so it's really good. And they've had to rebuild some substations, and they're rebuilding a transmission system. And so, but the rebuild is on them. The county's not directing them. They're doing it upon their own needs.
Well, yes. So I just have heard, people have said that they replaced it with the same equipment as before.
No, we've asked that question many a times, and they're putting heavier crossbars, heavier poles, in some cases heavier wires, and in a lot of cases protected wire. They've said that numerous times. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but that's the reports we continue to get. So
Okay.
And Jane, if I could just interrupt you briefly, we have the fortune of having our Boulder Creek Fire Chief, Mark Bingham, on the call, and he's been made a panelist so he could address any fire-related questions. And Chief, I think you heard the question earlier about smoldering spots. Did you want to add anything additional to what the advice that was given?
Oh, I think Julie gave good advice. Call 911, let the people that do it every day decide who needs to go where and how to deal with it. We have all the resources.
Great, thanks. And we'll leave you on the call if that's okay, Chief Bingham, and throw any fire-related questions your way. Jane, did you have an additional question before we moved over to Nancy?
Yeah, I have my fourth question.
Okay.
And is the county approaching the planning, the rebuilding of those areas with any kind of high risk concerns in regards to insurances? The reason I ask is that the Boulder County in Colorado has a ordinance, a program where people in high fire risk areas have to show that they are building in a fire safe way. When they check off that they have done that, they can take that to the insurance, and the insurance will see that the building is fire resistant and they can get insurance. Is any kind of thought being given to that in the planning streamlining?
So that's a new one to me, and it's a great idea. So we'll look into it. I haven't heard that before. I understand the challenges with fire insurance these days. I know with the past couple of years, it's been a real challenge, even in our hills here. And so let me look into that a bit. I don't have an answer for you today.
You know, I'd be happy to send you this link to a wonderful document. And yeah, I get your email. but I send it.
Jane,
Yes.
I'd say that discussions with the California Insurance Commissioner that we've had, we've said, how could you get people credit for doing something like defensible space? Not so much of cutting down a swath of trees, but the underbrush and all. If you showed that you did that, would you get credit in essence from your insurance company? Those types of things, but those are being addressed right now on a statewide basis as well.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you can build your house in a much fire safe way than we are familiar with. And it is outlined in that document. So it's not just the area around, it is how the building is put together.
Okay, thanks, Jane. And Nancy Macy, one of the founders of the Valley Women's Club and the chair of its environmental committee.
Quick clarification point related to the EPA coming to remove the hazardous ash and so on from houses. People whose houses are still there, you said you were working on helping them have free removal of the hazardous things because there are so many things outside of the house that are hazardous that have melted, everything from propane tanks and generators to pumps to all sorts of things. And you said they would have to sign a piece of paper if that happens. Is there any signature needed for the first group of people who's lost their houses and the EPA is going to come around and remove it? And is there warning given to them, Dr. Underwood, to when they're coming so they can be sure to sift through their ashes ahead of time? And I would love it if Mark would tell me if there really are kits for safety kits to wear to remove hazardous waste, or not hazardous waste, but to sift through the ashes for people. But first, Dr. Underwood, if you would clarify those two little points.
I can actually also speak to what we're calling re-entry kits.
Yeah.
My staff have been putting together probably close to 2,000 of them, and we've put them in 4 different locations now for you to get. And I know at least the friends that I had that they got some, and when they went sifting through their ash. So they are at the Boulder Creek Fire Station. Actually, there's a nice little garden between the Boulder Creek Fire Station. Chief Bingham was helpful with me. Between the fire station and the sheriff's substation, and that's where they're located. In there, it's self-serve, so you can go in and retrieve one of the re-entry kits. It contains a Tyvek or a clothing protection. It contains an N95 mask, and it contains gloves and a few other things like trash bags so that you can put these items in before you leave, after you leave, I mean. So a few other things in addition.
That's wonderful.
So Boulder Creek, Felton Fire Station, and then up at Bonnie Doon Fire Station, and then over on Davenport Resource Services Center. And we've been restocking them regularly, but if we know that they're low, we'll get more out there.
Right.
And so I did see a question about the sifting too. I will just say, I mean, we're kind of encouraging people to wait until after the household hazardous waste removal is done. But in the case of even my friends, they wanted to go in there before. And again, you just obviously have to be careful to avoid those places where you know that things could be dangerous, wear your N95, wear your protective gear. But you certainly can, gently sift through. Maybe you knew that there was a jewelry box in a certain area of your home, and you could go to that location and gently sift through and looking for it. Again, we're recommending that they wait. And just to that point, they're taking the US EPA are not going to be taking material like jewelry boxes or the remains that left over. They're taking like paint cans. They're taking things that are obvious household hazardous waste, things that are still partially there. So I know there's some concern about, well, they'll take the ashes with my memorabilia in it. No, they're not going to be taking that. And again, we're talking about phase 1 here. And definitely after phase 1, you will have an opportunity. There'll be a space of time that you can definitely get in there and do the sifting if you can wait until after that phase 1 is done. As to this issue of whether or not you can know that they're going to be there at your particular property, in just speaking with US EPA, they do have sort of a, what I'll call a fact sheet that they're working on right now to make it, they used it in a different fire and now they're making it specific to this fire. They do have a phone number on there that they have people answering. And my understanding is, to the extent they can, they will try to let you know if they're coming in the direction of your property. And again, one of the things I think you can do is use this map, and we'll be making sure that you guys get this information. There'll be a map that you can see how they're, they might start down in a Boulder Creek in a certain location. You can see how they're moving, and you can probably even anticipate, they'll be in my direction of my home tomorrow or something. So again, there'll be some different mechanisms that you can become aware of about phase 1. I'm less clear about phase 2, but I think there's, because there's right of entry on that and things like that, I have a feeling there's also a mechanism, but I don't want to speak out and say that there is for sure, but I have a feeling there's also a mechanism there too, that you could be made aware that they will be coming to your property.
Okay, thank you very much. That's wonderful. Related to hardening people's homes, it's not just an insurance issue, but it's a self-protection issue. Is the county going to be doing anything in the planning through the permit process to encourage or motivate people to harden their homes against wildfire? In other words, to use the types of materials that will be far more fire resistant than their home that burned down. And I'm hoping the county will be able to do that kind of thing, because that would have saved a lot of houses in Paradise, for example.
So I'll take a run at that. So in an effort to streamline and process these permits as quickly as possible, we'll be pushing the building code. And so as far as the building code has requirements in terms of fire safety, that's what's going to be required. I think what you're talking about are additional restrictions. And we really want that to be up to the homeowners, because we don't want to reduce or streamline purpose.
I got it.
So it's a bit of a balance. We'll be pushing the building code. That's going to be our main mission. And decisions beyond the building code are up to individual homeowners.
Can you provide information for them as part of the process to say, hey, you might want to consider this, so the next time around your home will be safer?
We are trying to put together a list of, designers and professionals, and we could certainly put that word out there to where we share that type of information. Maybe that could be on the same type of listing. Okay,
great. I've seen those lists. I know San Mateo Fire Department has a really good one. I'll try and dig it up and send it to you, Matt. Last question, will the management position for the Office of Emergency Services be restored in 2021? Since it's apparent that office has been very crucial in this process.
Well, I think the function, Nicole Coburn might be
Yeah, I can address that. So Nicole Coburn, acting CAO. So that position has been eliminated as part of our revised budget that was approved by the board. Obviously, we can take a look at that function going forward. Our office is working on a transition plan to incorporate emergency services into our department. And so there is staff that is transferring to our office, and also staff within our office that has been working on the COVID and fire emergencies that have extensive experience now. So I believe we can make this a smooth transition, but we appreciate the concerns over that position, and we'll be looking closely at this as we make this transition.
Thank you, Nicole. One last quick question. Matt, could you go over the process that the county is doing in dealing with the trees? There are a lot of people who don't want a tree that looks like it might be okay because they want it to hold their hillside. They want the roots there, a living tree to hold the hillside. And plus it was a favorite tree or whatever. But, you know, what's the process to assure people that viable trees will not be removed? Because we see a lot of trees being taken out and bucked up into links to be made into lumber, and they don't look like they were dead.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so really, the trees that we're working on now are those in the public right-of-way.
Yeah.
And I think you're talking about the private trees, so I'll get to that in a second. But in the public right-of-way, we have arborists going through the area, and we're going to make 2 passes. They're going to tell us the most critical ones that need to be taken down now because of safety, and then the ones that we should monitor. And then we'll probably get a reassessment and then come back through as a second round and take those out if need be. So we're watching the ones in the public right-of-way. The ones on private property are going to be up to the homeowners. The only ones that are being a gray area is if they're on the verge of falling and US EPA, part of their debris removal, if they see a tree that's an absolute hazard to their workers in that moment, then they'll mitigate that tree. But that's only, and they don't want to do that, but if they find one that's on the verge of falling, they'll probably take that down. But otherwise, it's completely up to the homeowner. And I've heard reports of people removing trees off of private property, and that's not coming from the county. That's not coming from US EPA. We're not behind that. So that's something that homeowners need to be watchful of.
Yeah, we had reports that in Paradise, all along the distribution lines, that PG&E was going quite a bit outside of their right-of-way and taking down large trees, and we were concerned that we're grateful to hear that the county will not be doing that here, and we're really hoping PG&E won't be doing it either.
I will share trees that are right on the edge of the right-of-way. We were topping some of those so we could take some of the weight off and they wouldn't fall across the road. So there was some trimming, and there could be a situation where if the tree is right on the edge of the right-of-way, it's within fall zone of the right-of-way and it's in poor shape. But we would have an arborist check it before we remove that tree. And so there could be some gray areas there on that line. But we understand people's want and need to keep those trees, so we're aware of that.
That's great. Thank you, Matt.
Is PG&E coordinating with you, with the county?
No, PG&E is running their own tree crews, and so they're doing the work they feel they need to do to get their power system up and running.
Okay, I wanted to interrupt before we go into maybe public questions. With Scott Chamberlain of FEMA, you had mentioned a couple of grant programs or pots of money that are available, but I think there's more than that, and that you had mentioned. Could maybe just go down and review and then give people an idea of, again, where they have to go to apply for those pots of money?
Yes, sir. So the financial assistance is what I was talking about before, which is the rental, the replacement, the repair dollars. But after that series of money, the next phase would be looking at other needs assistance. So if people lost personal property, transportation, if they had medical related to the disaster, funeral related to the disaster, dental related to the disaster, those are other programs they could potentially be eligible for. And all of those, again, require you to register first to see what you're going to be eligible for. Not everyone's going to be eligible for everything. And of course, we just talked about we can't duplicate benefits, but FEMA is going to try to get you the assistance and coordinate with those voluntary agencies that are in the community as well for those unmet needs and try to get people help that way as well.
Is that up to the maximum of $35,500 for most of those programs?
So the max grant is $35,500, and our programs run for 18 months. So if somebody finds a place to rent, we could potentially help them for up to 18 months. But the average grant amount, just to manage everyone's expectations, the average grant amount would probably be between $5,000 and $6,000 because of all those other things I talked about, insurance, and they're getting support from somewhere else. But yes, that is correct. $35,500 is the max grant amount, but not everyone will meet that threshold.
Okay, great. And Scott will just repeat the place where people can apply online, and that's at disasterassistance.gov. That's
Disasterassistance.gov, and the 1-800-621-3362 is they can call. It's a 24-hour number. You can register there and get any questions answered that you have about your case.
great. Thank you so much. All right, well, we'll open it up to members of the public who are on the call and have typed questions in our question and answer section. Just a reminder to those, we really would prefer the questions come through the Q&A function, which is in the lower toolbar for the Zoom web application. It's easier for us to track those questions and respond to them quickly rather than in the chat. I do see that we have had questions posed to us in the chat, and we will try to get to those before the end of the call. But if you're going to ask a question going forward, we would just kindly request that you do so in the chat so we can track those and make sure we got them answered. So the first question comes from Kathy, and she says, why is it taking so long for phase 1 to start? September 28th is not soon enough. Cleanup is needed now. I'm going to guess that either Matt or Marilyn are best poised to answer that question.
Yeah, hi. I too am anxious and would like it to start sooner. So I can tell you that I've been sort of pressing them to understand why it can't happen sooner. But I do know it's a big operation that they're bringing in 100 people and lots of equipment. And essentially they're staging a temporary household hazardous waste location to, make sure they organize these items that they'll be finding on the different parcels. So it's a big operation. I know it seems like, why do we have to wait that long? I appreciate that as well. And I can tell you that's we don't have a lot of options here, to be honest with you. But so that's the one that we have before us, US EPA, and starting by September 28th. And I did want to make a point. There was a comment, just because it's kind of on the same topic. Just to make sure people understand, there's a lot of ash that was created by the trees burning and the vegetation burning. That is not ash that is going to be cleaned up as phase 2 either. So you have lots of ash maybe in your front yard from mostly from the trees, but they've done studies from past fires and found that the toxic ash that they are finding, it's in the structure of the home. So it's not ash that's about out in your yard somewhere. So it's really going to be focused on single family homes that were destroyed, or ADUs, alternative dwelling units, sheds that are above 120 square feet, or barns, or any device structure like that, and even structures less than 120 square feet if they contained hazardous materials. So all of those structures, so you may have more than one structure on your property that was burned. In those cases, the household hazardous waste will be looking at all structures. And then the second phase, phase 2, will also be looking at ash debris removal from all those structures. So it's not just your the homes, the private homes.
Okay, great. And I'm going to have our friend Julie Weiss from the Valley Women's Club board help me toggle through some of these questions. So Julie, you'll take the next one.
Sure. Ray Cancino has asked, in Paradise and other fires have taught us about, the need for streamlined planning, fee reductions, and adaptable zone variances to allow people to rebuild. In Paradise, 1 year later, only 11 homes have been completed. What will our county do different?
So I'll take that one. And so I mentioned the streamlining. We're getting ahead of it. And what we saw and heard about the Paradise was that they didn't start bringing a consultant on board until virtually the day they wanted to start rebuilding. We've already started that process. I think we're a couple months early, actually. And one of the key components of the streamlining will be a pre-application process. And I saw somewhere or I heard somebody say something about, how do we know if we can rebuild and all that? And so if we can set up some of these programs early, then when it comes time to start the work and we've got our debris cleared, we should be able to hit the ground running. Regarding the fees are going to be just those costs that's required to do inspection, plan check, just those hard costs. So all of these rebuilds, the rebuilds are exempt from, you know, those impact fees. They've already paid that. So when we think about costs and fees, it's only to pay for the work that's being done for the homeowner. There's actual work, there's inspection. And I will say that contractors would have a really difficult time building homes without good plans and without good inspection. It's really important that all those pieces come together, and there's just a cost to provide those services. So this is a cost for service, nothing else.
Right, and the board's action last Tuesday, we went through a string of issues that the planning department presented, and the cooperative effort with Public Works and Environmental Health to do this together and do it as quickly as possible. Believe me, we know the people that are anxious to do it, and the fee structure will be as minimal as possible, just to pay for the basics that we need to. And we think we're going to get there much quicker than they did at Paradise and other places that have been struck by fire as well.
Great. I'll take the next one, JM. And then you can cut in at some point. Can we show Claire Machado said, can we show information on layers of the county's GIS for fire recovery, showing what roads are approved by the PW and fire agencies, and where PG&E lines are restored so that we can help others determine if they meet rebuilding requirements?
So I'll take that one. We do have layers on GIS, but it doesn't include, a lot of these are private roads and we don't have that data. And so that will be challenging for private roads. For public roads, they will meet standards. And with regard to PG&E, it's our understanding that the date is here in just a couple of days that they will be, their lines will be up and running. And so that won't be an issue. But I do think the issue will be those private roads that nobody has data on. And so we're just gonna have to work together. It's gonna be a case by case. I don't know that we can create a database quickly enough to address those needs. So we're gonna have to work together.
I think another thing, the septic systems and the replacement or upgrade of them, that's going to be a key factor in this rebuilding process too. Roads and septics are probably as key as anything, at top of the list.
Thank you. Sort of along those lines, another question from Claire was, can we also get information on what bridges still meet water standards? I'm not sure exactly what she means by water standards, but Matt, do you want to, sounds like a public works issue.
Can you repeat it, JM? I didn't catch part of that.
Yeah, it just is, can we also get information on what bridges still meet water standards?
Oh, no. So she's saying H20 loading, that's H20.
Okay.
So all of the public bridges, there has not been a change to loading factors. And so if it's a public bridge, we're good. Even the one we replaced on Swanton Road, it's temporary, but it's still of the right strength. Now, if it's a private bridge, we don't have loading factors for private bridges. And so the owners of those bridges will have to have an engineer assess those structures. And if it's destroyed, they're going to have an engineer, provide some options for temporary and permanent. I would suggest temporary to get people access again, but private bridges will require private engineers. Those private owners will have to bring some of those experts in.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Kathy that you've already somewhat addressed, Matt, but perhaps you could flesh it out a little bit more. And that is, why is the county not offering free and expedited permits to rebuild? $10,000 in permits is not acceptable. Is the building department increasing staff to issue permits?
So I'd like to chime on to what Bruce was saying. Our streamlining is cutting the building permit fees down a lot because it's cost recovery. And there's a couple departments that are pretty much waiving their review and just providing conditions. And that's going to save a lot of money because we don't have to provide the service. We're going to let people figure some of that on their own with their professionals. regarding, what was the second part of that, JM?
It was, are we going to be increasing our staff to issue permits more quickly?
So we're negotiating with a consultant team to come in and provide this streamlined process and provide the staffing needed. We are not adding staff, full-time staff. We want a consultant that come in and go right back out when we're done with them. And so that's our, it's more financially prudent to do it that way.
All right. Julie is going to ask the next question. She is muted though. Julie?
I'm
There
now
you go.
unmuted. Chris Adams asked, will people that choose to rebuild on a different lot still see benefits of streamlined permitting, etc.?
So if somebody wants to come in and build on an unburned lot, they're going to be going through the more normal process because the streamlining is really geared towards the survivors and those that want to rebuild on their burned parcels. Now, I will say that as we learn going forward with the streamlined process, we absolutely will be trying to employ the streamlined process for the future. But for now, we're going to focus all of our resources and attention in terms of the streamlining for those that are trying to rebuild their burned homes. But I know we're going to learn a lot of great lessons, and we're going to put those into place permanently.
Okay, Chris Adams, how does the EPA determine if contents on the interior of a burned home is hazardous? I think some people are concerned irreplaceable heirlooms might get scooped up by the EPA during phase 1 before people have a chance to sift through debris.
Well, I can go through that again. I think I did try to incorporate that in an earlier comment on debris. Again, they're focused, they've been doing this for a number of years now at a number of fires, and they're very astute at sweeping through, and they actually want to do this fairly quickly. They want to get through properties quickly, so they have a good eye about what they're looking for as far as household hazardous waste, and they're definitely not looking through sifting through ash to get memorabilia. So I would just say they have a great amount of expertise, and I've never heard of any concerns, by the way, too, from other people I've heard in other counties where they've done this work that they were taking people's memorabilia away. So I don't think there should be a concern there.
Okay, and the next question comes from Kirsten Flynn. She says, we live in a road that has a lot of lost homes along Clear Creek. We need a bridge to access our properties to clean up the site, but we cannot build a bridge without a permit. We cannot get a building permit until the cleanup is complete. Will there be a workaround for this challenge? How will they do phase 1 cleanup?
So I'll take that one, JM. And so that private bridge that was burned, they will need to bring in a private engineer to assess it and look at options such as temporary bridging. And, and I'll use the county as an example. We put a temporary bridge in place without any permitting because it's temporary, and then we'll go back through the process and address any needs or concerns with the permanent replacement. So I would suggest they get a local or get an engineer, professional engineer out there, assess the damage and create a plan for a temporary structure and get it in place.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Next question. Our house was completed in 2010. If we already know our house site has no asbestos, heavy metal, etc., aside from household items, is there it says communication path, but I'm guessing they mean, is there a path forward for them to get started?
So I think it sounds like they're thinking skipping phase 1. No, at this point, no. There needs to go through phase 1. Then again, they could choose an option of a private contractor option in phase 2.
Okay, thank you. Julie.
Was this our house was completed in 2010?
Yeah, there's the next one.
Okay. Thank you for addressing the risk of debris flows. When do you anticipate that the work of the Watershed Emergency Response Team, WERT, will be ready, and how can residents access it. Will
Sure.
so there are lots of questions on this one. Will the hazard mapping include potential debris flow pathways? And if so, is this the result of modeling?
So maybe
How
we'll
do
just stop there and let Marilyn
Yeah.
address those, and then we'll go to the others.
Actually, Matt, you want to chime in and I'll.
Sorry.
I got that one. So we do have the work data. They haven't completed the full report. We don't expect that for another week or so, but we've taken their data and we're adding detail to it. And so they came through very quickly. They provided amazing data, but not the detail we need to create specific plans to know who's in the pathway. And so we've got a team put together right now, and we're looking at their data. We're ground truthing it to ensure that what we share out has been validated, and we will be putting together very specific maps to show who's in the pathway, who's not, and then we'll be putting together an evacuation plan and provide all that data. We will be providing that data. We think we need at least 2 more weeks to get to that mapping level with some ground truthing to ensure that what we're sharing is accurate. So a couple weeks plus.
Okay. I think that you kind of answered the how do you plan to conduct outreach to educate people on the debris flow hazards and when should this material be available? So I think you've answered that, and more information will be coming in a couple.
I will say that we'll make it part of community meetings. We'll make it part of press releases, news briefings. We will use every tool in our toolbox to get the word out. It's going to be a high priority because it's highly critical and it's very, very important. So we understand that.
Okay. And then given the issues faced by residents in past power outages, including PG&E's PSPS shutoffs, with cell phone and electric-based landlines being useless, how do you expect to make sure residents are warned for evacuations in a timely manner?
We had this conversation today, and I'm not going to profess that I have all the answers to this, but one of the conversation pieces was to share with people that use radios, and we can get information out on the radio, and this would be like a weather radio. And we're actually putting in a request now through the state to get a bunch of radios, hundreds of radios, and we can share those out because we think that is going to be an issue. If we get into a PSPS situation, cell service is down, how do we communicate? We're going to go back to radios, just standard weather radio. And so more to come on that, but that's the discussion we had today, and it seems to be the most likely solution for the situation you just shared.
Right.
Looks like Chief Bingham wanted to speak up really quickly. Julie, Chief.
Just to add to that, we're going to work on multiple plans, so we're not just leaning on one. Matt's correct. We're going to have to get creative and go back to the old school and use weather radios, but there'll be more than one plan. Just like we had more than one plan for the fire evacuation, and we had to employ every plan we had to make it work.
Thank you, Chief.
The CERT teams can be helpful too, getting the word out to neighborhoods.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you. There's a question in here about sifting through the ashes. I think, Marilyn, you had addressed that earlier regarding when's it possible to do that. Do you want to maybe just give us a couple lines on that for those who maybe joined the call late?
Sure. Just again, we're providing reentry kits so people can hopefully do it safely. But we're kind of encouraging folks to do it after the household hazardous waste is removed, just because that's obviously a safer time. But if not, please use the reentry kit so you can do it safely and do it gently. Don't re-entrain it. Don't make the debris worse by spreading it outside your structure, because that might affect your insurance or your ability to be part of the public program. But yeah, we would, obviously there is a desire to do so and do it safely.
Great, thank you. Follow up on that is there a timeline to check the foundation before it disappears?
So there will be definitely some gap of time between phase 1 and phase 2 where you could bring in a structural engineer if you'd like to check it out. I mean, I will say I didn't know this. I had no idea this is such a big deal. And somebody from the planning department said, yeah, just take a screwdriver up and you can probably oftentimes go up to your foundation and you can actually just put it right into your foundation now. And that will kind of give you a sense of, you know, whether or not you should spend the money on a structural engineer. But yeah, there will definitely be time for that.
Okay. Julie, would you take the next question from Heidi McFarland on septic?
Regarding the debris removal, shouldn't we get our septic inspected first prior to all of the debris removal so that we know if it's functioning prior to phase 1 and 2? So if it's damaged during cleanup, they can be held accountable. So this is our biggest asset still remaining on our land.
Sure. So I will say if in both CAL FIRE and some of the building inspectors and our environmental health inspectors, if we've seen there's the septic tank, there might have been the burn might have affected it, especially if it had a plastic lid or had risers that might have melted. They will be demarcating that and trying to, you know, because now it's a hazard for people going on the property. I will say that the step between phase 1 will not be involving a lot of heavy equipment getting on the property by US EPA. They will not be endangering your septic tank, but there is part of the step between phase 1 and phase 2 is, and you signing the right of entry is, they actually request that you demarcate your septic tank. They demarcate your leach field. You mark off your wellhead so that these can be avoided by any of the heavy equipment that is there on site during the phase 2.
Okay. My home survived, Paul asked where'd it go? Okay. My home survived the fire intact and was green tagged, but I lost a garage and shed structures. So does that qualify for public debris removal option?
Yes. So again, anything greater than 120 square feet automatically is qualified. And again, when we put up these, we referred to these maps about the structures that have been assessed for damage. It's always helpful if you go and look on that map and make sure these structures were, identified first by CAL FIRE and then later by building inspectors. But yes, please make sure of that, but they would be part of that public debris removal process.
Okay. Is there a specific plan for the removal of burned cars?
Well, let's see. So I will say that the burned cars were part of the Paradise County and previous removal efforts in phase 2. And we encourage people, first of all, we know we've already seen some where they've already been taken out. And when you take them out, unfortunately, sometimes the battery has busted and you leave lead acid on the ground. You might leave oil. And actually, as far as phase 2, they actually will clean up some of that if they know the vehicle was there. But if you start taking away vehicles, they actually don't know what was parked there. So there is a desire not to have it removed before phase 2. I hope it's included in phase 2 because now I'm hearing that may be something up for debate for this next round between FEMA and OES. So I do think that if there's an interest on the part, we will be trying to let them know that we're interested in that car removal as well, because I do think it's an important part of that phase 2 removal.
Mm-hmm. I think that not all towing companies are hearing the same message because some cars are being towed out of here and some they're following the FEMA guidelines of not removing the cars. So that might be an important word. I don't know how you talk to all the towing companies, but anyway. How do I get my contact information? This is from Jeff Rose for scheduling the phase 1 and 2 debris removal. So do you guys have is there a database with our names and our addresses that have been, destroyed in fire, or how does that work? Who's going to call us and contact us? What's that process?
Yeah.
Or do you know yet?
So I know that phase 1 will be done. They will start up and they will just be moving in teams going through the different parcels to remove the household hazardous waste, and they will not be trying to contact the owners. That is done under an emergency order of the state, and it has declared those household hazardous waste a danger, and therefore they do not need right of entry. They can go on your property and remove those items. And I did see a fact sheet from US EPA that indicated they will have a phone number. They said in that fact sheet something about if you want to call them because you want to know when they're going to your property, you can call them. They'll try to let you know, but again, their idea of how they can do this really quickly, right, is not to be arranging appointment times. That will slow them down, and that 6 to 8 week time period will be extended. So they want to get to as many properties as possible. In phase 2, where you have to sign them right away, I think there will be another opportunity for you to find out when they're working on your property, but I don't have that information to share with you specifically right now.
Jan, I know we're getting close to 7:30, and I just wanted, like Elisa Benson, she's maybe it's not the closing remarks, but she's the lead person for us on County on Rebuilding. And do you have any general comments from, outside of the questions that you've heard now, Elisa?
Oh, thank you, Supervisor McPherson. Yeah, my name is Elisa Benson. I'm Assistant County Administrative Officer here. And tonight we've really focused with Marilyn and Matt's help on the rebuild components of recovery. There are other components of recovery as well, really those after actions around emergency preparedness and resilience moving forward. How do we continue to help folks with access to health, human, and housing services? So we have multiple branches that we will be working towards standing up to support all of our survivors of this tragic fire. So I'm going to be the person working across our departments to sort of get that going. I want to say we really welcome all the questions you guys have raised tonight. It gives me a sense of what are the things we need to get answers to. I think Matt and Marilyn have done an incredible job getting ahead of things, both in terms of public infrastructure, working with our utility partners, and then really that phase 1, phase 2 debris cleanup issue. So that's really where we all start with this. But we're going to pay a lot of attention to what's in the chat and what's in your questions and start feeding that into our own information sources and what we can get out on the web, how we can get that out to you guys in other ways, and working with our state and federal partners to get answers for you. So this is going to be a long journey for us. We've got a lot of people. This is their priority to really help you rebuild our communities. So we're looking forward to doing this hard work with you. And we're going to do everything we can to leverage every resource, whether it's local, state, federal, community, business, to really support our community's recovery.
We do have a little more time. I'd just like to have Mr. Hardy or Kevin Wynn just weigh in on anything that you think that in general that you should mention that hasn't come up. We do have other questions and we're going to follow through. I want to assure those who have submitted questions, we are going to look at those, and I really do appreciate that. But Mr. Wynn or Mr. Hardy, do you have anything that you think should be mentioned at this time in general for an overall oversight of the recovery process?
I think this is Tom Hardy. It would I think it'd be beneficial if Kevin from the Small Business Administration would speak about their programs.
I think we're having. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can
Great.
talk. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, once you register, as Mr. Chamberlain said, with FEMA, you'll probably be recommended to the United States Small Business Administration for homeowners, renters, and businesses of all sizes. And we encourage you to fill out that application if you are recommended to the Small Business Administration. SBA offers low-interest disaster loans at 1.18% for homeowners to repair or replace the primary residence that was burned or damaged or destroyed. For renters and homeowners, we also offer up to $40,000 for your personal property. Businesses who suffered any kind of physical loss, we offer loans up to $2 million at a low interest rate of 3%, terms up to 30 years, which makes recovery very affordable. Once again, over 80% of the loans from the Small Business Administration in these kind of disaster declarations go to homeowners and renters. We look at 3 criteria: your credit history, your repayment ability, and the fact that you're already a declared disaster area, Santa Cruz County. Very simple application process. Like Mr. Chamberlain said, if you are recommended to SBA, you must fill out the application to have the federal recovery process go forward. SBA.gov/ELA to fill out the application. I've already sent some information to JM to post on the website there and answer any other questions. Low interest disaster loans to help you rebuild and repair and get through the disaster recovery period. And that's all, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kevin. We have a time for a few more questions in the question and answer function. We have Luke Bailey ask, I have 30 years left on my loan and I feel nervous at the idea of rebuilding in a forest as wildfire risk increases. Given that mountain communities throughout the West face this, is our community doing anything? What can we do to wisely and safely live in forests as temperatures rise? Chief, I don't know if you would like to take the first crack at that, but I know that there are some sort of infrastructure pieces to that question as well.
Yeah, that's a big wide open question. I'll say that living here in the San Lorenzo Valley, living in the forest and dealing with wildfire is going to be something we'll always have to be aware of, we'll always have to be ready for, and we're always going to be preparing for. Home hardening is something that we're going to be pushing towards folks. So as they rebuild, they're going to be rebuilding under the new standards, and they're going to have compliant buildings to the code, building construction, also to the fire code. And in doing that, they're going to have a better chance of surviving in any future fires. Along with that, we're working with a bunch of different agencies, including the state with CAL FIRE, to do vegetation management programs, shaded fuel breaks, and we're continuing to work on the mountains around here and the roadways to make sure that people can evacuate safely, we can get egress when needed, and they have a better chance of surviving if this happens again.
Great, thank you. Quick question on hazardous materials again. Will they be removed prior to the onset of significant precipitation? We sort of touched on that, but Marilyn, could you expand on that briefly?
Well, it's obviously hard to exactly predict when precipitation occurs, but we know that as soon as October starts to come, you know, there's certainly the possibility that we'll start getting rain. You know, I know these US EPA people, they are stationed out of San Francisco, so they certainly know when we get our rains. I mean, in the sense of the rainy season, and I'm sure they'll work as quickly as possible. So I, you know, certainly no guarantees, because once October hits, we're possible of rain, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sort of related to that, Marilyn, regarding the wetting of ash for debris removal, is there a requirement to contain any runoff on the parcel so as not to contaminate nearby parcels or waterways? What effective measures can be used to accomplish this?
First of all, the wetting, and it's actually spelled out quite a bit in the work plan, the model work plan, you're only wetting enough to keep the ash from going up, not to create runoff. So first of all, that would not be, so that's not what we're trying to aim for. We're just trying to aim to enough to keep the ash from becoming re-entrained. But certainly that would be not a good thing if you as a private contractor, and certainly the public option, would not want to be creating any runoff from the wetting of the ash in the structure.
Okay, let's take a couple of additional questions. Do you want to go in there, Julie, and take the next one for me? And let's take it from Theo Lovejoy. He has a question about FEMA and SBA while we have the folks on the call from those organizations.
Are FEMA grant funds available for those that will not be denied SBA loans? If I have a job and good credit, will I qualify for a FEMA grant, not loan? Question mark.
That's a great question. So on FEMA's side for the grant program, it is not financially based. So we don't do a credit check or see what your financial worthiness is because it's a grant. So there's There's no, it's an equal playing field for everyone trying to become eligible for FEMA funds.
Okay.
Okay.
And Bree Driver asked, in terms of not rebuilding, what if the parcel is deemed not rebuildable? What is the property worth if the land can't be built on?
That might be a question that we would need to source through our county auditor, controller office, property tax collector. So we will forward that message to them and try to get an answer there.
Okay.
Pardon? Did someone want to weigh in there? No. Okay. Let's get one more question in, and it will be from Catherine Wilson. I had defensible space, but the lot across the street from me was overgrown with brush, and that's the route the fire took to my house. Will there be efforts by the county to require landowners to clear brush on their property? Matt, I'm going to throw that one over to you. Chief Bingham, if you want to join in on that, and then also the supervisor.
I think that's a fire question, really. It's they do have. Chief, would you answer that one?
Yes. We currently don't have any teeth, I'll say it and just come out with it. Right now, I have done defensible space inspections since I came into this position. I've given warning and notices to residences that I felt were a threat to the neighborhood or to a neighboring residence. And currently, my fire district, our AHJ, doesn't have any teeth as far as being able to make change. We're working on that with all the county fire agencies together. Some of us do have means to make that change, some of us do not. But as a whole, the Fire Prevention Officers Group is trying to get a solution, working with the laws, and it will be a clean solution, and we're going to get one this year. So hopefully in the future, we will be able to take care of that.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And Julie, I think you're going to read one last one.
Yeah, this is from my neighborhood, where we lost 26 out of 28 houses. This is from Christina Salinas. How is the county going to address fire preparedness in the future? What funds will be allocated to this at county, city, and neighborhood levels? And also, what about forest fire strike team training for volunteers so that more community members can take, I'm going to make up an active role in fire prevention? That may just be a good question to ask and leave it on everybody's lap here.
With our financial situation in the county right now, before the fires, and in the advent of COVID-19, I don't know that any substantial program could be established anytime soon, but it's something that'll be on our minds, that's for sure. But I just, that hasn't come up at this point before the Board of Supervisors. We're just trying to get back to normal, if you will.
Sure.
And it'd be a huge undertaking, as we know. I'm not sure how we'd attain that in the immediate future, honestly.
Can I add to that, Supervisor?
Please.
Thank you, Bruce. It's not the good old days anymore where the fire chief or the fire department would drive down through town and just swoop up whoever they could and throw them in the back of a pickup truck. Our volunteers and our paid agencies are held to the same standards of training and education, and that goes to the tracking of that information. There's a lengthy process to become a firefighter, and quite frankly, it's hard enough to track and manage all the bodies that we put out there. To do it safely and to be effective with our suppression efforts and our rescue efforts at the same time, having a span of control over our people. To have a volunteer force on top of a volunteer force, speaking for myself, that would be quite difficult. And right now, when we do an evacuation, we don't have to worry about the people that are left behind because it's an order. We need to leave and we get to do our jobs. When they're behind, then I have to change and bounce back and forth between
Are we worried about the people that are left behind doing what they're not supposed to be doing, and or suppression efforts to save other houses or put the fire out? Does that make sense?
Right, it does. And you know, I think we've come to the end. The time limit that we have, I can't just express my appreciation for your straightforward answers. We do have questions that weren't asked, but we do have them, and I can assure you we will get to those. There's literally hundreds that come into our supervisor's office or the county in general every day, but we will try to get the answers to those as quickly as we can. And again, I just want to say for everybody who has helped in the recovery effort, and it's going to be a long haul, but thank you very much. And thank you for the panelists that were here to give some great answers that let people know what is the reality check, and I feel really good about how our county, comparatively, we've learned lessons from disasters in other areas recently in the last few years. And so that's helped us a lot, and we're going to move as quickly as we can, I can assure you, and as compassionately as we can as well. So I want to thank all the panelists for being here, the Valley Women's Club for co-hosting this, and we'll have another one of these. We're going to have more than a few more. So we will let you know, and we'll move along as quickly as we can. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you that there was great cooperation between the city of Santa Cruz Park and Rec, who really got the Civic Auditorium going overnight to help the San Lorenzo Valley residents. It was great seeing that coordination. Thank you.
Till we meet again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good evening.